Welcome to WatchMojo.com, and today we're counting down our picks for the top 5 most explosive facts about coup d'etat. For this list,
we're defining a coup as the overthrow of a government by a rival political faction through illegal and typically violent means.
Coups are carried out by one group of elites against another group of elites, so they're distinct from revolutions, invasions, civil wars, and uprisings, even though these all can overlap. And sometimes, life for the common people just goes on as normal. That said, there are always exceptions. Number 5. Coups d'etat are as old as ancient Greece and Rome. They didn't call them coups then, but overthrowing governments is as old as governments themselves. In ancient times, most countries either had kings or were a republic, but sometimes would-be rulers would usurp their own governments with a private army. In Athens, the city was couped by a group of 400 aristocrats who were fed up with democracy. They were replaced in another coup 7 years later by a smaller, scarier group called the 30 Tyrants. Ancient Rome had its fair share of coups too. Julius Caesar came to power in a coup and then was killed in one. Coups continued happening through the Roman Empire, China, Byzantium, Mongolia, and they didn't stop. Famous modern coup leaders like Napoleon, Franco, and Mussolini are part of a venerable heritage of blood-soaked ambition. Number 4. Coups are most common in Latin America and Africa. If Latin America is an apartment, Spain was the worst roommate ever. Even if they left 200 years ago, Spanish forces left a huge mess. Dirty dishes, dust bunnies, and unpaid bills in the form of weak economies, and a legacy of racism and overpowered militaries. After Spain lost control of its mismanaged colonies in the 1820s, the only powerful institution left was the army. And they used that power. Most countries in Latin America have had a coup, and when you've done it once, it can apparently be hard to kick the habit. Case in point, Argentina, which between 1930 and 1976 had a coup every 9 years or so on average. Still, for all Latin America's historical clout, it's the continent of Africa that's the modern pace setter for coups, with over 200 occurring since the 1960s. Number 3. Thailand is very coup-prone. Even today, there are a handful of world leaders who took power by force, but many of them have stabilized and steered towards democracy. And then there's Thailand. It's had 19 coups since 1932, yet only 25 democratic elections. The Thai military chronically tries to clean up government, but is just as incompetent at running the country. Civilian politics is made up of the red and yellow factions, and the poor and the populists versus the middle class and the aristocracy. The two political camps have nothing in common,
and the only peacemakers have been the army and the monarchy. Thailand's last coup was in 2014. In 2019, the coup's leader, Prayut Chan-o-cha, was elected prime minister in what was widely seen as an unfair race.
Number 2. Most coups fail. If all this has been pessimistic, here's some relief. Coups are decreasing in frequency, and most coups fail to make history. Of course, there are some famous failed coups like the Gunpowder Plot. Guy Fawkes dastardly planned to blow up Protestant King James I and replace him with a Catholic. And then there's Adolf Hitler's 1923 beer hall putsch in Munich. Hitler's innovation was to announce to the crowd that the revolution had already begun, and they should join in. Although he was able to lead his revolt to some success, the Nazi militias were soon defeated by police, thus stopping Hitler once and for all. Well, until he ran for election 10 years later and seized control of Germany. But that's another video altogether. Number 1. The US backed 7 coups during the Cold War that we know of. Sometimes, coups are backed by foreign governments, and when you need help overthrowing a government, no one does it better than the CIA. From 1953 to 1973, the US overthrew the governments of Iran, Guatemala, Congo, the Dominican Republic, South Vietnam, Brazil, and Chile. And that's just what they've admitted to. Some of the governments overthrown were democratic, but all of them were vulnerable to being influenced by the US's rival, the Soviet Union. In Southeast Asia, US puppets didn't last long. The new South Vietnamese government would lose to the north, and US-backed General Lon Nol of Cambodia would rule for only 5 years. But in Latin America, US coup governments established brutal dictatorships, setting back democracy for a generation. Do you agree with our picks? Check out this other recent clip from WatchMojo, and be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos.